Today we're changing the engine oil pan gasket on a Buick Lesabre. This video applies to the 8th generation Lesabre, which was produced from 2000 until 2005. At this point, the negative battery terminal has been disconnected and the vehicle has been lifted and secured. First, at the bottom of the vehicle, have a drain pan ready. We're going to drain the oil. Use a 15mm socket, 3-inch extension to remove the drain plug. Use the appropriate size adapter to remove your oil filter. On the other side of the pan, disconnect the connector for the oil level sensor. Now it might be a little tricky to get the connector off. So what we're going to do is rotate the level sensor so that the top part is facing down. We're going to use a large adjustable wrench. It seems to be about 29mm wrench. And now that this part is facing us, we can go ahead and use a pick or a flathead screwdriver to pull this connector, and there it is. Here's a view from the passenger side. Support the transmission pan with a jack and a block of wood. There is an engine mount bracket that is bolted onto the oil pan. It will need to be removed. The bracket connects to the oil pan with 2 bolts here, and it runs up here to the actual engine mount. We're gonna have to remove this nut that's connecting the engine mount bracket to the actual engine mount. There is a hole at the control arm, so you can pass a 21mm socket and a 12-inch extension to remove that nut. Remove the passenger side wheel assembly. With this nut removed, now you can raise the transmission up with the jack, and it's gonna raise the engine mount bracket up too. Raise it up until it almost touches the actual engine mount. From here, you have now clear access to the 2 bolts that are securing the engine mount bracket to the oil pan. Easily accessible from here. There's still one more bolt holding the engine mount bracket, and we're gonna access it through the engine bay. But first we need to remove your coolant recovery tank. 3 fasteners hold it in place. Use a 10mm socket to remove this bolt. 1 nut right here. Use an extension. And there's another nut on this side. The coolant recovery tank has been moved to the side. I did not have to disconnect the hose at the bottom of it. Here we have the tensioner and the water pump. The final nut is located under and to the left of the water pump. Use a 15mm socket and a 3-inch extension to get at it. At this point, all of the fasteners have been removed, and there's still not enough clearance to get the engine mount bracket off. This stud is still preventing the bracket from coming out. And service information calls for the removal of the stud that is on the 3rd fastener. Now, I would recommend to do that, but I've seen those snap. And now what, huh? So the next best approach would be to remove the engine mount. To remove the right-hand side engine mount, use an 18mm socket to remove the 2 nuts. There's plenty of space. Don't worry about this bolt. You would normally hold the top bolt and remove the nut on the other side. But this bolt has a bracket that slips into the other engine mount bracket. Essentially, it's holding the bolt while you remove the nut on the other side. Socket size, 15mm. With the nut removed, now you can remove the motor mount, and now's a good time to replace that if it's worn. Now you can move that pesky engine mount bracket to the side. Back at the oil pan near the driver's side, use a trim tool to remove the center of the push pin that holds the transmission cooler lines. Then remove the push pin. Here, we're creating some extra space. Remove the 2 bolts holding the torque converter inspection cover. Socket size 10 millimeters. Then remove the cover. Remove the oil level sensor. And finally, we have the green light to remove all of the oil pan bolts. Use a 3/8 inch socket and an extension. The oil pan should come down with no issues. Make sure the screen on the oil pickup tube is clean. And from here, it's standard procedure. You know, clean the mating surfaces, give the pan an inspection for debris, etc. The new gasket should only fit one way. No RTV is needed. No RTV is needed. Service information calls for 1 drop of thread locker for each oil pan bolt. Oil pan bolts are torqued to 124 inch-pounds. That's inch-pounds. Get the engine mount bracket into position, loosely threading the top nut. Get the engine mount stud into the bracket. Then, the engine mount into the 2 studs on the frame. Finish by putting that top bolt into position. Loosely install the engine bracket to oil pan bolts. The 2 engine mount nuts are torqued to 52 foot-pounds. Same with the nut that secures to this bolt. The nut securing the engine mount to the bracket is torqued to 59 foot-pounds. The other 3 fasteners that are securing the engine mount bracket are torqued to 44 foot-pounds. Service information also calls for a drop of thread locker on these 3. I left the bottom 2 snug due to the limited clearance. Inspection cover bolts are snugged up. Oil level sensor is torqued to 15 foot-pounds, and the oil drain plug is torqued to 22 foot-pounds. The oil filter has a torque specification of 22 foot-pounds, but to me that seems a bit excessive. Finger tight plus a half a turn is what I did. A drain and refill calls for about 4.5 quarts of 10W30. The wheel lug nuts are torqued to 100 foot-pounds, and that should be it. I hope you learned something. Have a good day.